Okay, good evening everyone. Today we'll continue with the topic on the 10 perfections. I think we've gone through a few lessons, so we kind of introduced the what are 10 perfections, the different kind of Bodhisattva practices that leads to different kinds of enlightenment or different kinds of Buddhahood. We talked about the different types of the past Buddhas, and in the Theravada tradition, the 28 so-called 28 past Buddhas, right? And we also talked about the 10 perfections in the Theravada Tipitaka, and of course the relevant suttas that has the quality or the particular virtue mentioned in the perfections that can actually reach this arahanthood even in one lifetime, right? So that's the, at least in the Theravada tradition, that's the spirit of the Buddha's teaching, to teach something and get us quickly enlightened. All right, so that is the 10 perfections in the table chart. So we talk about the Mahayana or the Tibetan version of the 10 perfections. So they have these 5 paths and 10 stages. Right, so we stopped at the next slide. So we stopped here on the previous sort of lesson. So the thing we need to take note is actually the last column. The last column. We are using it as a reference to compare with the Theravada levels of sainthood. Right, so for the most left column talks about the 11 stages. So the bhumi means stages. Right, so there are total 11 stages. So they are mentioned in the left column. So the right column talks about the birth which one can take place if a person practices this the Mahayana Bodhisattva path. So it is mentioned that if a person goes through the first bhumi, or they perfected the first bhumi, when they practice generosity, they can be reborn as a ruler of Jambudvipa. Jambudvipa means the continents of the earth, and basically a person is like a universal king, universal monarch, right? So that happens like once in a while, probably when the human lifespan is like in the thousands of years old. So normally in the suttas kind of explanation. Okay, so the next one, second bhumi, would be ruler over the 4 continents. So basically that's the 4 heavenly kings. The 4 continents represent the 4 different lands of 4 different species. Then following in order, the cosmological order, then the heaven of 33, then followed by house of this Parakrama, ruler of enjoying emanations, ruler of Tusita. So Tusita is a place, the so-called place where the heavenly beings reside. I mean the Bodhisattvas reside. They're in queue, waiting to come down to be reborn as the future Buddhas. So that's the Tusita. Okay, then the next one, ruler of controlling others' emanations. Okay, so from the first bhumi all the way to the 7th bhumi are the sense sphere, sense realm, sense sphere devas. Yeah, so the next one onwards, ruler over a first order universe of 1,000 realms. So that is probably the retinue of the Brahmas. Yeah, then the next one, Brahma, the ruler over a second order universe, and so on. So so we need to take note, the ruler of controlling others' emanations, and earlier, that means from the first bhumi all the way to the 7th bhumi, that could very well indicate the first or second stages of sainthood in Theravada so-called understanding. Yeah, and the next one if you look at the 10th Bhumi, the ruler of the gods of the pure realm. So to be, in order to be this reborn in the pure abode or this pure realm, one needs to attain this anagami, the third stage of sainthood. Right? So that one is how do you call it? Close to enlightenment already. So the last one, 11 Bhumi, complete and full enlightenment. So the Theravada equivalent would be an Arahant, the fourth stage of sainthood. Right, so this is just a rough kind of comparison, and we're going to move on to the Theravada table. This next slide. Okay, so this is the Theravada table in comparison. So this one is nothing to do with the 10 paramitas. You may include the 10 paramitas as part of it, but even without the 10 paramitas, the standard formula, talking about the Sangha, the different levels of sainthood, from this stream enterer all the way to the Arahant, also has this similar result. Alright, so let's look at the left column. So the left column talks about the 4 stages of sainthood: stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and Arahant. So that's the one we normally chant in the, let's say if you do a puja, right, the Sangha puja, the 4 pairs of persons talking about this. Path to stream entry and fruition to stream entry, path to once returner, fruition of once returner, path and fruition of non-returner, path and fruition of Arahant. So total there are 8 types of individual, or these 4 pairs of persons. Okay, so what happens is, if you look at the right hand column, so that's where we do the comparison with the Mahayana Bodhisattva path, the stream enterer will be reborn up to 7 times, 7 more times as a human or in a heaven. Alright, so it mentions in a heaven, that doesn't mention which kind of heaven. Then for once returner, talks about 1 more as a human. Once more as a human. If I'm not wrong, it could be also the sense sphere devas also. Okay, then for non-returner, it will be this once more in a pure abode. So that's the sort of compelling evidence here, non-returner. So that will be like the equivalent of the 10th Bhumi, pure abode. So the 10th Bhumi is basically an anagami, according to this Theravada table. Okay, then the final one, the Arahant, will have no more rebirth. Similar to the final Bhumi, complete and full enlightenment. Alright, so what is sort of removed? What kind of defilement is removed? So the middle column talks about the fetters. The fetters. So if a person removes identity view, doubt, and ritual attachment, then they can be reborn, right? 7 more times, or in this human or heaven. Okay, let's go to the previous slide and look at the Bodhisattva path. What kind of perfections? Okay, so if you look at the different perfections here, so you have generosity, discipline, patience, diligence, meditation, wisdom. Right? So this is my personal interpretation. I'm not trained in the Mahayana Bodhisattva path. So if a person wants to be free from certain doubt of this stream enterer, they need to overcome delusion, certain level of delusion. So wisdom is required. So probably they need to practice up to this 6 Bhumi. 6 Bhumi. So the first 6 could be comprising both the path and the fruition of a stream enterer, according to the Theravada table in comparison. Okay, then let's go back to the Theravada table. Okay, and for one's returner, it's more or less the same, except they weaken sensual desire and ill will. They weaken, but they haven't overcome sense desire and ill will. Right, so they get reborn once more as a human. They mention human. Actually, once more as a human or the sense fear devas. Okay, let's go to the previous slide. Yeah, okay. So what are the qualities they need to perfect? Paramita of skillful means, yeah, this become ruler of controlling other emanations. Yeah, then the ruler, then paramita of strength, and this paramita of aspiration. Alright, so all these are the ones in the ruler over the first order universe. That's basically the Brahma's retinue already. Okay, so ruler of controlling others' emanations, still considered the so-called the sense sphere deva. So that's the basically the Mara's realm. The realm which Mara is supposedly residing, it's in this realm, ruler of this controlling others' emanation. Okay, so let's go to the Theravada table. Okay, so if a person supposedly reach one's returner, right, they are sort of reborn once more as a human or a sense sphere deva. So that kind of compares with the Mahayana Bodhisattva path. And if you want to talk about non-returner, so there's a path and fruition of a non-returner. So a fruition of a non-returner will be sort of reborn in this pure abode. But if a person is on a path, they might be somewhere in the Brahma realms also, probably quite close to the pure abode. So they're talking about the different rulers of these various Brahma worlds. Okay, then the last one is the Arahant. Okay, let's look at the previous slide again. Okay, yeah, so the 10th Bhumi talks about paramita of primordial wisdom. So that's another wisdom. So a person reach this primordial wisdom, they overcome greed and anger totally. And the mind is totally free from greed and anger. So they become non-returner according to the Theravada table. And the 11th Bhumi will be this complete and full enlightenment. So these are the Mahayana set of perfection. So there's actually more than 10, right? They have 10 also. So the Theravada 10 and the Mahayana 10 is different. Okay, then the next slide. Yeah, so this one talks about the Arahant needs to overcome these few things. Right? Material rebirth lasts, immaterial rebirth lasts. So basically they no longer have any attachment to the form and formless concentrations. And they won't want to be reborn in any of the Brahma worlds also. And the next one is conceit. Conceit is basically the ego, the self. Then the 9th is restlessness, and number 10 is ignorance. Right, so that's the complete and full enlightenment. So they overcome these things. Right, do you have any questions at the moment? Is this chart too confusing? If not, then I'm going to move on, yes? Okay, let's move on to the next one. So what are the practices according to the Theravada suttas that can overcome these fetters? So indirectly we are also cultivating this perfection, right? So right from the probably the first 2 lessons of these 10 perfections, we talk about a person can be a bodhisattva aiming for arahantship. Doesn't necessarily mean bodhisattva means must aim for Buddhahood. So in the case of Theravada Buddhism, is mostly bodhisattva aiming for arahantship, as mentioned in most of the suttas. Okay, so this is an example of overcoming self-identity view. So that's the first three fetters. That means if a person wants to become a stream enterer, this is how they should practice. So this, I just briefly read this quote from the scripture. Venerable Sir, how does self-identity view come into being? There is the case householder when an uninstructed, run-of-the-mill person who has no regard for noble ones is not well versed or disciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for men of integrity, is not well versed or disciplined in their Dhamma, assumes form to be the self, or the self as possessing form, or form as in the self, or the self as in form. Feeling, perception, mental fabrication, consciousness. This is how self-identity view comes into being. So basically, if a person still have the sense of the self, sense of I, then one will assume self to be the form, or form to be the self. That means my body is me, or I am the body, or form as in the self, or the body is within the sphere of the self, or the self is inside the form, inside the shell of the form. So this is various combinations talking about the first aggregate, and the same with the second aggregate. The feeling is self, right? The self is in the feeling, and so on. And third aggregate the same, fourth aggregate, and the fifth aggregate. So, so if a person is not yet a stream enterer, they will associate this ego, this self, as into a concept. They'll associate with an identity. For example, I'm a Chinese, I'm a Singaporean, I'm a Buddhist. So they make the I equals to something, and they treat that concept, the something, equals the true self. So that's for the stream enterer. Then for the Arahant, they have this overcoming of conceit, which is the source of the self, or source of the ego, source of the I, and that's the difference. Okay, next one. Okay, so removing of fetters. And Venerable Sir, how does self-identity view not come into being? There is the case householder, where a well-instructed disciple of the noble ones, who is regarded for noble ones, is well versed and disciplined in their Dhamma, who has regard for men of integrity, is well versed and disciplined in their Dhamma, does not assume form to be the self, or the self as possessing form, or form as in the self, or the self as in form. Feeling, perception, mental fabrication, consciousness, and the same combinations. This is how self-identity view does not come into being. So this is found in the Isiddhata Sutta. So this is a conversation between a layman and Venerable Isiddhata. So Venerable Isiddhata is the one answering the questions. Alright, so so it's easy to say, do not assume do not assume yourself to be the form. Do not assume the five aggregates as the self. Do not assume there is a self. It's easy to say do not assume, but what is the process involved to reach this not assuming? So it's the whole Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, next slide. So this is the practice. Again, I always like to mention this, how to practice to not assume. So there's a process to program the mind. Because the mind is programmed to associate, to assume everything as the self. My experience, this is my laptop, my this, my that, or this is the self. Okay, so we need to have certain kinds of reflection. So there's a conversation between, I think, Venerable Kotika and Venerable Sariputta. Right, so Venerable Kotika is asking Venerable Sariputta for how is it possible for an ordinary person, let's say just an ordinary monk, how can they practice and reach stream entry, the first level of sainthood? So Venerable Sariputta answered, it's possible, right, if you attend appropriate way to these 5 clinging aggregates as inconstant. Inconstant means impermanence, stressful or suffering, a disease, a cancer, an error, painful, affliction, alien, dissolution, emptiness, not self. So there's a whole list of reflections, you just pick one. So normally we just pick impermanence. The others require some kind of understanding first. Okay, would realize the fruit of stream entry. So you just need one step. You just use a reflection, and then you can reach stream entry. So this is the first question. And Venerable Kotika continued to ask, then how can a stream enterer practice and reach one's returner? And the answer from Venerable Sariputta the same. A monk who has reached, attained stream entry will have to do the same thing. Reflect the 5 aggregates as inconstant, stressful, disease, and so on, and will reach the fruit of this one's returning. And the same question from Venerable Kotika, and how can they upgrade and become this non-returner? And Venerable Sariputta replied the same thing. And the 4th question, the same thing, how to reach arahanthood, also the same answer. So basically you just need to do one step. Just keep reflecting on impermanence. So this is very in line with the Maha Satipatthana Sutta on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, on right mindfulness. A person always has to be mindful of impermanence. So that is the sort of the key or the main ingredient to the practice. Okay, so you can find this in the Silavand Sutta. Okay, next slide. So how do you apply? So we understand there's 5 aggregates. So does it have to be applied only in sitting? Can it applied in other postures? So all postures can be done, standing, sitting, walking, lying down. But how about the things, the thinking process, the thought process? So it's mentioned in this Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, the discourse of non-self. So any of the aggregate, form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness, whatsoever that is in the past, future or present, internal or external, blatant or subtle, common or sublime, far or near, these 5 aggregates has to be seen as not self. So you need to reflect on impermanence to understand not self. So basically, any kind of thought, wherever you place your attention, so it doesn't matter, you can be thinking of the past, think of the future, think of the present. You also need to reflect on impermanence. So some people always say, okay, meditation have to be at the present moment. Yes, so that is not the case. So we need to think of the past and future also. If not, we cannot function. We need to worry and plan. And even meditation, we think of the parts of the body growing and falling off. So that requires some memory of the past. You've seen the body part decaying before, and you need to imagine the future. How is it like when it's old? How is it like when it's falling off? So that's thinking of the past and future, right? So even when we think of past and future, we think appropriately with the right reflection, with detachment. And same for the present moment. When we place our attention, feeling the sensation, so that's very present. Our real-time evidence, the 4 elements, so that's very evidential, present moment. So in any of these past, future, or present, a person can also reflect wrongly, right? So if a person do not have right reflection, they think of the past, then they dwell in the past. They start to worry and think of the past or fantasize of the past. And future, the same thing. They can worry or fantasize about the future. They have clinging. And present, also the same. right? If you feel present painful feeling, if you do not have right reflection, you'll be struggling, have aversion. If you observe a present pleasant feeling, you do not know how to reflect correctly, then you develop greed and you have more attachment. So that is the case. So likewise, internal or external. So when we think of the sensations, for example, we think of the 4 elements within the body, so that's internal. When we wish all beings in all directions, sometimes we may think of external elements. When we extend the sphere of our attention to a wider area, so sometimes we may feel some sensations outside our nervous system, so that's external. Blatant or subtle, so these are gross or subtle states of mind. Blatant would be something gross, like the body, our nervous system. So subtle would be like mental energy. Common would be common states of mind, for example, greed or anger. Sublime would be like the sublime states of concentration. Yeah, so these are sublime states. Far or near. Yeah? So all these are basically conditions for attachment. Yeah, wherever you place your attention, all these are conditions for attachment. So basically, this sutta is telling us to reflect appropriately wherever we place our attention. Okay, so that's the slide. Any further slides? Yeah, so that's the end of the sharing, right? 9 o'clock. And we can conclude for the theoretical sharing. So next week we'll talk on a new topic. I think it's on karma, suggested by one of the participants previously. Yeah, so now we can open the floor to Q&A. Any questions?
Ante, I have a question. If both are okay, regardless of whether you are Theravada, Mahayana, or whichever tradition, you still have to fulfill all the criteria, right? Following the 5 precepts, keeping the precepts well, and the paramitas also, right? Ante, so that you can actually be one of those category there, right?
Yeah, so after we did the table comparison between the Mahayana Bodhisattva path and the Theravada's 4 stages of sainthood, basically, we need to go through the sort of overcoming of the same defilements. Yeah, we have to reach the more or less the same kind of enlightenment, but different emphasis.
So the Theravada one will be easier, right, Bante?
Depends on how you practice. Yeah, depends on how you practice.
That one don't have so many criteria, right? Theravada one.
I would say the Buddhist, the perfections is like a different expression, that's all. Yeah, just like even in Theravada teachings, you already have like the Noble Eightfold Path, and then another sutta will come up with another different expression. They will tell you 37 factors of enlightenment.
Well,
so different expression, but it's still talking about the Noble Eightfold Path.
Thank you, Bante.
Okay, no problem. Okay, any other questions? How about from the comments section on the Facebook?
So far, nothing, Bante.
Okay, all right. Okay, if there's no issues with everyone here, I hope the explanation is not confusing. I hope the table comparison is clear. Then we can go for a 5-minute break, and we'll be back for the guided meditation session. Alright, see you all later. Yes, Terence, yeah, something.
Can you explain more on this? I think this is not very clear.
Okay. This one, huh? How to practice. Okay,
Yeah,
so we
instead
are...
of
Okay, so this is like the whole list of reflections, right? There's impermanence, stressful, disease, cancer, arrow, painful, affliction, right? Alien, dissolution, emptiness, non-self. So all these sound, some of them sound very profound, and require much so-called maybe initial intellectual kind of understanding, or some level of practice to come to a conclusion and understanding of that certain concept. For example, like emptiness. Right? You cannot just use reflection of emptiness right from the start. Probably you can't get anywhere far. So we use something evidential such as impermanence. So impermanence is something that's evidential, and it helps with detachment. A person may use, for example, suffering or stress, but a person, if they do not have the foundation of impermanence, they will hold on to the stress, they hold on to the suffering. They do not know how to let go. So the foundation of detachment comes with impermanence. So impermanence is mentioned first, then you can understand the rest. So the other concepts such as disease, cancer, arrow, all these are closely associated with stress or suffering. Right? Because suffering talks about birth, aging, sickness, and death. So you have all these other concepts like cancer and arrow. So the simile of the arrow talks about the second kind of arrow that attacks us. So the initial painful feeling, that's one arrow shot at us. But if we choose to get upset and react angrily over that unpleasant feeling, that's like a second arrow being shot at us. So we receive two arrows. So that's the example of the arrow. So if a person loves the metaphors or analogies of the Buddha, you may use them in the meditation like a reminder. But in general, I think to play safe, we just use impermanence. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question. So if you want to link this stress and not self, we've already discussed in the one of the previous sessions on the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta. How do you come to a conclusion of non-self? How do you come to a conclusion of non-self? So basically, if, let's say, if any of the aggregates is truly self, then there should be total happiness. You shouldn't have any kind of suffering. So that's the premise which the Buddha gave. But the fact that these aggregates are changing, the elements, the sensations are changing all the time, and if you want it to stay the same, so for example in our reflection, we can, normally if we have time, we reflect the 5 aggregates. For example, we take the first aggregate, form. Form is made of the 4 elements, earth, fire, wind, water elements. So earth represents the hard or soft sensations, fire is the hot and cold sensations, wind is the movement, and water is the moisture, humidity. So if let's say you want the temperature to remain cool forever, but then your environment is very hot, very warm, so you cannot control the temperature. So you feel perspiring and sweaty, so that's the water element, you feel very uncomfortable, right? So you cannot control the elements, right? Because you cannot control it, it's always changing. It's always changing all the time, you cannot control it. Will there be stress? Will there be suffering? You want it to be cool, but it's not cool, it's hot. So that will lead to a kind of suffering, a kind of stress. And anything that leads to stress is not the true self. It's not the ultimate kind of self. So the Buddha mentioned that it's not self. So likewise with the feeling aggregate, you cannot tell your feelings to be pleasant forever. Sometimes you have painful feeling. Whatever posture you're in, after some time the feelings will change. So that itself also leads to unsatisfactoriness, and also leading to the conclusion of not self. Yeah? So that's the logic. So you can go through the rest of the aggregates. Perception would be your memories. You cannot trust your memories, and memories you cannot recall everything all the time. So because sometimes I've forgotten certain person's name, or I've forgotten where I leave my items, so that will result in certain stress, right? You can't, your memory is not permanent. It doesn't stay forever. It's not like a computer or cloud drive. Even computer also impermanent, right? Sometimes the drive crashes and whatever not. Yeah? So that is not self. And likewise, mental formations. Every time, new formations are formed. Every time we're always thinking. So it's always changing, always unsatisfactory, and always is not the true self. And finally, our consciousness, our attention. Right? Our attention is or our awareness to whatever we see, hear, smell, think, taste, and touch. The intensity always changes, and therefore it's not self. Right? So that's the reflections.
Yeah, thank you, Mate. So actually, my question is, you see, the first part is, for it is possible that a virtuous monk. So
Yeah.
I think it's linked to the parami and this virtuous monk, this virtuousness. Is it a key linking to be the parami? Then
Yeah, so,
only proceed to the next step.
Yeah, very good question. So the fundamental point here is that the main Nikayas talk about mainly, right, the Noble Eightfold Path as the foundation, as the basis. So even virtue is part of the right speech, right action, right livelihood. So that's also part of the paramitas. Yeah. So it's a different expression. You may choose to link with the paramis, but ultimately you need the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, no problem. Okay, so the paramis is not like a separate practice from the Noble Eightfold Path. Right? It's not like a totally different route. So it's again linking to the same thing as we compared with the two tables, reach the same kind of enlightenment, leading to the elimination of certain attachment to certain rebirths, but different expressions. Alright, okay, if there's no further questions, then we can start the guided meditation. So you find a comfortable sitting posture, make sure the back is upright and the rest of the body relaxed. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to visualize the body from head to toe, and we're going to start with the hairs. We wish all the hairs well and happy. Every time we generate a new image, a new patch of hair, then we need to wish it well and happy. So whatever we think, that's making use of the 5 clinging aggregates. So if we do not have any kind of right thought, then the mind will naturally cling and generate unskillful thoughts. So if we follow the right thought of the Eightfold Path, that is skillful thoughts. So the indicator whether you are on the right track is to measure the level of stress or the measure of suffering. So if we get less and less anxiety, less stress, getting more calm, that means you're on the right track. If we get more tension, more stress, more anxiety, then something is wrong. So basically we're using the Four Noble Truths as the reference, as the indicator. So any form of reduction of craving will lead to the reduction of stress and tension. So the mind will settle down to like a point where it hits rock bottom and it cannot settle any further. So that is the baseline emotion. So that's the samatha version. Learning to calm the mind, but not yet reaching any forms of concentration at the moment. And we learn to not cling to the aggregates by generating the right thought. Once we cling on any phenomenon, even the calm sensation, we just hold on to that, we forget generating right thought, and that's clinging to the aggregates. And we'll be swept away by the currents. Okay, and if your mind is relatively calm, then we can reflect on impermanence. So all these hairs go through birth, aging, sickness, and passing away. So we think of them growing and falling, many, many cycles. And as we keep looping this process, we can observe this sense of self or selfishness. Is it increasing or decreasing? And then we can ask ourselves, are these hairs truly self? And the more we think of impermanence, is the self or the sense of self truly self? Okay, then we are going to move on to the nails, fingernails and toenails, and we wish them well and happy. So we ended the Vipassana phase of the impurity of the body. Now we're moving back to the Samatha phase again, wishing the nails well and happy. And we're going to wish it well and happy. At that time, we observe the sense of self. Is it solidifying again, re-solidifying? So this sense of self or ego is a bit like the cement in a concrete mixer. Once you do not reflect on impermanence, it will harden. But we are not thinking of impermanence yet. This is just for your observation. Okay, so currently when we think of the nails, then we think of the nails associated with the self. These are my nails or my body parts. Okay, so now we're going to think of impermanence. All these nails go through birth, aging, sickness, death. And we think of them growing and falling, many, many cycles. And as we keep looping this process, we can observe whether this sense of self or selfishness, is it increasing or decreasing? So for the Vipassana phase, reflecting impermanence can be actually done the whole day. That's why we always encourage you to reflect impermanence the whole day, because it's a very long route to overcome this ego spectrum. The sense of self is a very large spectrum, and it's a long journey to detach. Okay, then we can ask ourselves, are these nails truly self? Can we tell the nails not to go through birth and death? And then we can start to think of the teeth. Visualize the teeth in the mouth. We wish them well and happy. And all these teeth go through birth, aging, sickness, and passing away. So we think of them growing and falling, many, many cycles. And as we keep looping this process, we can observe the sense of self or selfishness. Is it increasing or decreasing in intensity? And we can ask ourselves, are these teeth truly self? Can we tell the teeth not to go through this birth and death? And we can now think of the skin. We wish all the skin well and happy from head to toe. Every patch of skin, we wish them well and happy. Okay, next we can think of impermanence of all the skin. All the skin go through birth, aging, sickness, and death. And we think of the skin growing and falling, many, many cycles. And as we keep looping this process, we can observe this sense of self, whether is it increasing or decreasing in intensity. Then we can ask ourselves, are the skin truly self? Can we tell the skin not to go through birth and death? Okay, now we're going to switch to the Sublime States meditation, and we're using the 4 elements as the foundation of the mindfulness. And we're not going to visualize anymore, we're just feeling sensations. So throughout the whole body, whatever sensation that appear, these are the 4 elements: earth, fire, wind, water element sensations. Earth represents any hard or soft sensations, fire is hot and cold, wind is fast, slow movements, and water is moist or dry. So there's no need to purposely control, there's no need to create those sensations. Whatever sensation appear, we just let it appear naturally by themselves, and we wish them well and happy. So all these are happening real time, present moment. No need to imagine. And you don't have to crack your head if you cannot figure out which element does it belong to. Doesn't matter, it's just a rough, general kind of classification. The main thing is to just wish that sensation well and happy. Make peace with those sensations. And same thing, whatever feeling that appears, sometimes they may appear uncomfortable or painful or pleasant. Also wish them well and happy. Do not struggle or fight with them. So every new sensation appear, wish them well and happy. New sensation appear, wish them well and happy. So all constantly have this right thought and right effort. Make sure the mind is settled down, so that's the baseline emotion, so that's used to be a reference. If it's a neutral and bland emotion, that's the reference point to differentiate other states of mind. Okay, and once you've taken note of that emotion, of this baseline emotion, then what we are going to do is cultivate this boundless loving kindness, and we're going to wish all beings in all directions well and happy. Cultivate this metta parami, loving kindness perfection. So we wish all directions, above, below, and all across. No need to push the mind. Let it extend naturally by itself. However far you wish to go doesn't matter. and importantly is not to visualize. And every time we detect any sensation within that sphere of attention, we wish all beings well and happy. So now we add two words, all beings. New sensation appear, may all beings be well and happy. New sensation appear, may all beings be well and happy. So it doesn't matter, it may appear inside the body or outside the body, near or far, as long as we detect any sensation. That's the lowest common denominator. All beings are made of this particle, this sensation, these elements. And because there's no way to visualize all sentient beings. So to be fair, we use whatever, however far the mind can encompass all beings within the sphere of attention. We wish all beings well and happy. So we try to cultivate this boundless loving kindness, non-discriminative loving kindness, so we do not restrict to any particular group or persons. So we just use the foundation of mindfulness, the mindfulness of the body, the elements. And also when we over visualize, we'll tend to over dramatize. And we'll get dragged away by the 5 clinging aggregates into all the stray thoughts. So keep wishing all beings well and happy. Okay, then we can also observe the state of mind. If, let's say, there's any increment of joy, happiness, or peace, then that would indicate the first level of concentration compared to the baseline emotion, which is bland. So regardless of what you experience, all these are still part of the clinging aggregates. So we just treat them as byproduct. Emphasis is to keep on generating the right thoughts, keep wishing all beings well and happy. Okay, and now we're going to add some wisdom, some insight, and we're going to reflect how to cultivate a more unconditional kind of loving kindness. And if you really want to perfect this loving kindness, then we need to include some wisdom. So we need to reflect on impermanence. All these sensations, all these phenomenon, observe how they arise and pass away. So if there is real detachment, the indicator should have this Dhamma joy. Initial detachment should have some form of joy, and over time the joy will subside, so do not cling on to any of those emotions. Keep on reflecting on impermanence. Okay, if let's say the joy and happiness start to dissipate, one may get this neutral but refreshing kind of experience, and we call that equanimity, normally associated with the fourth level of concentration. And regardless of what you experience, keep on reflecting on impermanence. So in Mahayana Buddhism, they have the concept of this bodhicitta, to quickly reach enlightenment for the welfare of all beings. So how much welfare is this welfare? How deep is this well and happy? So it depends on how much you detach and what kind of spiritual happiness you discover. So next we move on to compassion. So for compassion, we wish all beings, may they be free from suffering. And we are going to use the non-discriminative method again. So all beings, regardless of their health status, whether they are rich or poor, healthy or sick, as long as they cling onto the aggregates, that will result in suffering. So whenever we detect any sensation, part of the aggregates, then we need to remind ourselves, may all beings be free from suffering. That includes ourselves. So the whole idea is not to cling and start to daydream, get washed away by the aggregates. So you should have some say on the steering wheel. No matter what happened to the currents or the weather, we just need to keep rowing the boat, keep on wishing all beings free from suffering. Once you stop wishing only, then the currents will drag you all around the place and you won't go anywhere. Okay, if all the conditions are right, you have the right thought, right effort, everything, the second sublime state, this compassion, may lead one to the second level of concentration, also indicated by the emotion of joy and happiness. So if your compassion feels joyful, that means you're on the right track. This is the concentrative kind of compassion. So if you look at the depictions of the Kuan Yin, Bodhisattva of compassion in Mahayana Buddhism, they are always depicted smiling. You don't see them pulling a long face. Yeah, so regardless of what you experience, keep on wishing all beings free from suffering. Okay, so this is just a glimpse of the middle way, eightfold path, compassion. So now we add some wisdom, and we're going to reflect how to overcome the suffering, which is to not cling on the 5 aggregates. So we're going to use impermanence to shake off that clinging. So we keep observing real time all the sensations, how they arise and pass away. And we can label impermanence or arising and passing. If let's say that joy and happiness start to dissipate, this time round one may experience a kind of blankness. It's no longer the equanimity of the 4th level of concentration. So in fact it's kind of blankness or spaciousness. So we call this the perception of infinite space. And regardless of what you experience, keep on thinking of, keep on reflecting on impermanence, keep rowing the boat. See how far can you cross to the other shore. Okay, and before we conclude, same gentle reminder, as long as we maintain this boundless, sublime state in all activities, standing, sitting, walking, or lying down, then this is the noblest living. And with that we can gently open our eyes, formally end the session, but informally still can generate right thought. Okay, any issues or questions? No? Okay. Not, then we're going to do the dedication chant. Dedicating merits. Akasata ca bhumata devanaga mahitika punyang tang anumoditva chirang rakantu loka sasanang etavata ca amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe deva sabbe bhuta sabbe sata anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. And this dedication of merits to departed. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. And aspiration. Imina punya kamena mame bala samagamo satang samagamo hotu yawa nibbana patiya. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, and we end off with paying respects to the Buddha by bowing 3 times. First bow, second bow, third bow. Okay, so that's the end. Any announcements from Terence? No. Then on the 12th December will be the last session now of this MSBS Tuesdays. Alright, so that's the end. Yep.